Starbucks is relocating some of its corporate jobs from Seattle and expanding operations to Tennessee. The company announced earlier this week they're building an office in Nashville later this year. Some Seattle employees will be asked to move and offered support to do so. The company says it will keep its North American and global support headquarters in Seattle. But Starbucks COO Mike Grams says they do have ambitions to establish a better presence in the southeast region of the United States. Here to help us dig deeper into this change and how the move by Starbucks will impact our city is Seattle University economics professor Joseph Phillips. Professor, thanks so much for being here with us today. Let's just dive right in. Starbucks is one of Seattle's largest corporate employers. What kind of impact could moving some of these jobs have on the local and state economy?
Well, I think it's important not to make too much of it or too little of it. We don't yet know how many jobs are being moved, so we'll have to wait and find out more about that. But I think this is more about creating new jobs in another location. And in some sense, it's probably inevitable that a company like Starbucks would be expanding to other parts of the country and setting up locations outside of Seattle where they're going to have significant employee presence. But, we have to look at both sides of it. It's not the sky is falling, but it's also a situation where we want to say, how could we do better and make sure that, future decisions by the company are more Seattle based.
What makes a city like Nashville attractive for expanding companies? And does this move say more about Nashville's growth or Seattle's challenges?
Well, according to what the company has said, it's really about their interest in expanding their business in the Southeast and the Midwest and parts of the Northeast, so that Nashville is a better location for doing that, closer to those markets. For example, Tennessee and even Kentucky are places where there are not a lot of Starbucks right now compared to other parts of the country, so that makes sense. They also mentioned they're looking forward to taking advantage of the Nashville workforce, right? So they think that there's going to be a talented workforce there. It will probably be one that will cost them less because the cost of living in Nashville is less. So there's a whole bunch of factors involved. But, based upon the announcement they made, Nashville certainly makes sense.
This is one thing I found interesting. Like Washington, Tennessee has no state income tax. So how much do tax policies tend to factor into where these companies decide to locate corporate jobs?
I don't think they're ever the main impetus for locating, but they are certainly a consideration. Well, there's many, many factors that go along with that. I think maybe just as important as tax policy is government regulatory policy. So, here in the city and the state, our regulatory environment is a little bit stricter than you're going to find in Tennessee. So that's another influence on their decision making. They mentioned the quality of the workforce. Certainly, we have a high quality workforce, but we just have to remember we're not the only part of the country that does. So, even though we're a world-class city, we still have to compete with a lot of other locations in the U.S. and outside the U.S.
You mentioned we have to compete. Well, what can Seattle do to stay competitive when it comes to attracting and keeping major corporate employers?
Well, I think, we have to have good lines of communication. We have to know what the companies are looking for, what they find problematic, and whether we can try to address those situations. But it's really, in my mind, it's more about communication. It's about government officials realizing, that major employers are a very important part of the city. And, like all stakeholders, they have to, we have to pay attention to what their needs are and what they're thinking and what their hopes are. So if we want Seattle to be front and center, you've got to have that good communication taking place.
Well, I really appreciate your insight on this topic today. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Seattle University economics professor Joseph Phillips.
You're welcome. Thank you.